Hello everyone out there. Update on a recent guest. We featured Sophia Softisnall on episode 57 of this podcast. On the episode, we discussed her branching into electronic music in the near future. Her first electronic track collaboration dropped recently. Let's hear a portion of that song before introducing our guest for today. Here is Sophia on the vocals for the track Swim Dizzy Remix by Undertow featuring Blue Lady on YouTube and SoundCloud. Hello and welcome to the NoCo. I am your host, Ivan Wing. Let's get to it. I have known today's guest since I was a wee little lad of 6 years old. So this guy is like a brother to me in every sense. Today's guest started his own business after a career in the Air Force. He exited his time in the military as a captain who spent his time as a contracting officer. In addition to being an entrepreneur, Russel Long writes and creates the music used here on the NoCo. Between these two aspects of our guest, we discuss how you have to learn the rules sometimes before breaking them. So without further delay, here's our conversation. Hello, listener, and welcome. This time, we are joined by the man who writes the music for the show himself, Russel Long. So first of all, good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for being willing to be on the show and sit down here on the microphone.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'm sure the listeners are just foaming at the mouth to hear what was some of the inspiration or how did you come to cultivate some of the music that people hear on the show?
Oh, wow. That's where we're going to start?
We can.
Okay, well.
It just kind of popped in my head.
Honestly, it's just me sitting down at the keyboard and kind of messing around with some different sounds and tracks and some drum loops and just seeing what happens, honestly.
And what program do you use?
So it's Reason 10. So whenever you started doing the podcast and we talked about, getting the old keyboard out again, I decided it had been about 5-6 years since I'd updated the software. So there's all kinds of new tips and tricks out there. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and the first sample I sent you was a couple of songs, but one of them was an Odessa track that had like this background loop I really enjoyed. Mm-hmm. And that came from, I sent you an Odessa track and you kind of made it your own from there.
Yeah, that's right. So you said as inspiration and then just decided to kind of mess around. And I recorded a couple different tracks and just decided to send it to you to see if you liked it. And sure enough, you're like, I'm going to use it. So Here we are.
And we are here in your home, and yesterday you were working on a brand new track that will be coming out soon on the show.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, okay. And so we're excited to have that.
Now, is it going to be in time for this episode? Who knows?
Well, you know, because it's up to you.
I guess so.
Yeah, we'll see when you tell me it's ready.
Okay.
Yeah, that's up to you. I'm not cracking the whip or anything.
Okay, yeah, no pressure.
So not only do you create and write music, but you also started and own your own business.
That is a fact.
And before we get to that, let's cover the road that led you to that.
All right.
Many people may not know you are formerly known as Captain Russel Long.
That is also true. Yes. So what originally brought me out to Colorado was the Air Force Academy. For those constant listeners who don't know, grew up in Oklahoma here with Buster, a.k.a. Ivan. Both of us have since gone through name changes since growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Some of the backstory of that name is on episode 24 with my friend Jordan.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so originally came out to the Air Force Academy. Liz and I were doing a long-distance relationship at that point. We both decided we loved the mountains, and whenever I got out, that we would move back. So here we are. It's just been over a year that we moved to Colorado Springs, and it's been a blast.
And how was coming from Tulsa, Oklahoma, moving here at 18, basic training, Air Force Academy, right here in Colorado Springs?
Just a whole new world. And with the academy, it's just like right at the foot of the mountain. So it's just looming over every day. I don't know. I loved it. I love the mountains. I love getting out and hiking and exploring. And there's just so much to do in the outdoors here that, I mean, there's some you can do in Oklahoma, but just there's so much more opportunity here. So that's what I always loved about it.
I just can't imagine that because I didn't come out to Colorado for the first time until I was 24, and I was blown away at that age after that much life experience. And you came out here at like freshly 18, 19 years old. And going outside in Tulsa is not a thing. So having that at your disposal. And your story about basic is just so incredible, how everything was nice. All the sergeants were in smiles. Everyone was thinking, hugging, goodbye to the family. You get on this bus.
That's right.
And the way you tell it is like you turn the corner, the guy stands up and starts yelling, and reality sets in.
Life changed in a moment. But yeah, so basic through most of freshman year was just very tough.
Yeah. So you had 5.5 years in the Air Force.
Yeah, so graduated in 2012 and then spent the next 5.5 years as a contracting officer, which may be the most boring job to try and describe out there.
Well, I'm sure you found a way to slap some flames on the side of this description. So what would you tell people is contract management?
So I flew a desk. No, so...
Yeah, but how many planes did you fly?
I pulled a lot of G's, but that was just thousands of dollars or millions of dollars sitting around that said desk.
Yeah.
So very different than the G's that my pilot friends might be pulling. So, no, what I did is, in the Air Force, those that are familiar with the, federal government know that billions of dollars and trillions of dollars are spent every year. So the people that are actually out there spending it are the contracting officers. So for the Air Force, what that actually looked like, I bought everything from bomb suits for the explosive ordnance disposal guys to refrigerators for the force support guys running the kitchens and cafeterias on base, janitorial services, all the way up to, I finished at Space and Missile Systems Center at Kirtland Air Force Base. So that was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which we really enjoyed our time in Albuquerque and got to explore New Mexico. But in that role, buying launch vehicles, so rockets and satellites, so it's a little bit more sexy than the year before where I was sitting around arguing about who stole toilet paper out of the janitorial closet. So wide breadth of experience there, making those acquisitions, going through that whole process, and then running teams of buyers as well. So really enjoyed the leadership aspect the most, kind of overseeing the different teams and training and organizing and yeah.
Yeah, you ended up with some contracts that you spent millions on for satellite launching, right?
Yeah, so the biggest contract, I did a source selection is what it's called when you go through this huge formal process to select a contract winner. So the one I did, I finished up at Kirtland, was a $115 million source selection to buy launch vehicles. And it was specifically a different payload adapter that would allow for ride sharing. So multiple small sats could go up together at the same time. That really helped share the cost of launch and bring it down to be more affordable. So anyway, so that was kind of a cool project.
Yeah, it's like Uber for satellites.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone just gets to get on, and then when they disperse up at the top, then they all get to do the job that they were intended for. Yeah,
exactly.
And so how does this lead you to exiting the Air Force and eventually starting your own business?
Yeah, so I was always interested in entrepreneurship. And, in high school, I didn't have a name for it. I definitely did some stuff during my time in high school that if anyone was familiar or I don't know, I think about that a lot because that was another idea I played around with before I settled on this consulting business was, advising high schoolers so they don't flounder and jump from major to major during college. But
which you advised some high schoolers during your time in the Air Force, right?
Yeah, and I still do actually. So it's always just been a volunteer piece. So I'm a missions liaison officer at ALO for the Air Force Academy. So students that are interested in applying, they get assigned to an ALO. And so I was assigned, and I actually still help with New Mexico's students and have different schools there assigned to me. So anyway, so those students, as they apply, it's a very confusing and convoluted process. I'm there to advise them. And eventually, as they get far enough along, I actually do an interview with them and give my recommendation to the admissions. So I give my recommendation to admissions office because they don't get to meet all these students. So I've actually been able to sit down with them, interview them, and say, hey, this is the kind of person, the kind of strengths and weaknesses that I saw talking with, this high schooler.
Right.
So
was there ever a time when you kind of thought, are you sure the academy's for you?
Oh, God.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. And I think a lot of people have learned the same thing. The reason that you go and the reason that you stay are different. So going, I thought I wanted to be a pilot. I thought I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. Did not want to do either of those things. So around sophomore, junior year, realizing that I like business. I like working with people and dealing with, those different types of situations rather than the math on a page or solving, tough engineering problems. I like the people problems, shifting the whole focus to business as my degree and then looking around for other career fields that would be a better fit in the Air Force. And that's where I stumbled upon contracting. But to jump back to this journey, I will say it was like junior or senior year at the academy. I took an entrepreneurship class and I was like, oh, this is really cool stuff. And played around with some ideas. And then while I was in the Air Force, I was able to go get my master's done online through Oklahoma State University because they had an entrepreneurship program I found out about. So got my master's degree, but at the same time got to play around with different business ideas and, play with around this idea of, hey, do I want to get out? Do I want to start my own company? So there's a couple false starts, a couple silly ideas we played around with some of my coworkers early on and everything. But
oh yeah, one of those was the shared housing.
Shared family housing.
Yeah,
that was a utter flop. We just didn't ever really take it anywhere. But I learned things even from that experience, I think is what's important. Learn how to play around starting a Facebook page and Facebook ads and getting a website started and some of those different aspects to starting a business. So while I never really went anywhere, it was still a learning experience. And same thing, Horizons Advising was kind of the next false start where I played around with this idea of, helping high school students figure out, like I talked about, I got into college and realized that what I thought I wanted to do and what I really enjoy were two very different things. So still something I'm interested in. And obviously, I'm still kind of advising students as an ALO, but just decided that I had a specific skill set. So as a contracting officer, what most people probably don't know is that the federal government makes a big effort to do business with small businesses, but it's still just confusing and convoluted. How much do you know about it?
Right.
That's where most business owners start. They're like, oh, the federal government spends lots of money and I want to get in there, and they make an emphasis to work with small businesses. It's just so hard to figure out how to take those next steps. So in my background, I would do small business set aside. So I would work with a ton of just different small businesses to do our purchases and our services and whatever contracts. So anyway, so I took that skill set and decided that, I already have the skill. I'm already in this industry, relationships and network and everything like that. So it made sense to use that as a starting point.
Yeah.
So that's when I decided, probably around January 2017, that this is where I wanted to go. And it was still months of debating between, looking at traditional jobs and going to traditional conferences and I'll play that whole game. And do I really want to take this leap and start my own company?
Right. And it was slow going at first.
Oh,
Last year was tough.
Yeah.
I remember you were going to brand new meetings multiple times a day, sometimes multiple times a week, just trying to build a repertoire and inform businesses, hey, are you doing business with the government yet? If you are, at what level? And then, how can I help you get in this relationship with the Air Force?
Yeah, it was really tough. Even the first, I would say 9 months. So before I even got out of the Air Force, I got the legal blessing to go and start my company, but it was nights and weekends, just any spare time I had outside of work to get it up and running. So that was about 3 months. And then I moved, which was tough. I moved from Albuquerque to here, Colorado Springs, and it was just starting brand new. Like, it really comes back to I knew one person and sat down with them for coffee, and they opened the door to 2 or 3 other folks who I sat down with, and then so on and so forth. Like, it just kept building from there. So just building my network from zero and finding the right types of people and the right types of events to go to. It was a really long and steep learning curve.
Yeah, and I was going to say, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who tune into the More You NoCo, and you're located down in Colorado Springs.
That's right.
And so if they're ever interested in how or could I possibly get connected to the Air Force or any sort of federal government contracting, maybe you or someone like yourself they should get in contact with.
Yeah, absolutely. And so actually I am the Small Business Development Center I know you've had on the show before. So shout out to SBDC.
That's right.
I'm actually a consultant for the Boulder SBDC.
Okay.
So a lot of startups can go to your SBDCs and get free consulting. So that's something that I've done with them. And then they have some different accelerators and stuff that they run as well that kind of bring in tech companies or space type technology from the commercial sector into the Air Force. So I've been involved with those here in Colorado Springs, but the Boulder SBDC is actually the one managing a lot of the course curriculum for those accelerators. So it's a pretty cool partnership. I think those that have really kind of been around Colorado for a while know that there can be some competitiveness or animosity even between, some northern or, Denver or Boulder and Colorado Springs. And I think it's just really cool to see that there's a lot more collaboration going on between these different cities. And in my opinion, being in this entrepreneurship space and being in the startup and tech space, if we're going to compete with the West Coast and the East Coast, they just have so much more venture capital, so many other opportunities. Everyone thinks of going out to San Francisco or the Silicon Valley if they're a tech startup, right? So if we're going to compete, we really have to collaborate together. And I think it goes bigger than just here, even within Colorado. Like we as the Midwest and the Rocky Mountain region, like Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona, Oklahoma, and Kansas, and all these surrounding states, we really need to learn to play together and work off each other's strengths, in my opinion, if we're ever to be taken seriously compared to the DC area or Silicon Valley, where all the startups like to go.
Right. Well, not every business is vying for the exact same type of contract, as you've taught me.
Oh, yeah.
Some are going into category F, some are going to category G, H, and if everyone's shouting each other out or, using each other as a soundboard for what should I be applying for, then yeah, everyone can succeed.
Yeah, and I'll say, kind of on a similar note, when I got here, I was really worried that I'd have a bunch of competition. And the reality is, several of those different people out there I thought might be competition are really more of strategic partnership is what I've been able to kind of develop with several of them, where there's certain type of work that I get that I'm just not interested in and I can send it to them and vice versa. There's just, the world is so big, and like you said, there's so many different programs and contracts and stuff that are out there that it's easy to find your niche and really exploit that and really set yourself apart doing that rather than trying to be everything to everyone. Yeah. It's just not, in my opinion, a sustainable business model. And then you're competing with people that you, like I said, you just don't need to compete with. Right. So there's a lot of examples like that, and I've even seen it with the accelerators where they're tackling a certain type of problem, and 8 companies are coming in all around this specific problem, but they're tackling it from different angles. And it sets up a lot of opportunity for these guys to work together, and I've seen since then proposals where these guys are now using each other as subcontractors, and one will be the prime in this case, and one will be the sub in this other case, and it just kind of flips based on what the opportunity is. So it's pretty cool to see that kind of collaboration go on.
That's cool. And if it weren't for you, I wouldn't know that Colorado Springs and Boulder are actually pretty active in the space technology STEM fields, which is really cool and fascinating. You just don't associate the Front Range Rocky Mountains with that industry.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of space and aerospace going on here in the state of Colorado. Cyber as well is pretty huge. And it's a really interesting environment, especially here down in the Springs, because we have so many different military installations. So sometimes sways and swings in the economy don't affect us as much because we have a huge commercial kind of private industry side, but then also a big military presence as well and a big federal presence. So I think it's kind of a nice mix here in Colorado. But yeah, we're second largest, I think, space industry in the U.S. So. Yeah. By state.
And how has the experience of being an entrepreneur been now that you're 14 months into the game versus what you thought it was going to be?
God, it's so much more fun now. Yeah, like I said, those first 9 months of just getting out and just going and talking to people every day, it was really because didn't know it at the time. I've met a lot of the wrong types of people, but I also met a lot of good folks that even just now, almost a year later, those relationships are starting to come into play. Just them knowing me, seeing me around at all kinds of different conferences, hearing word of mouth. I've worked with other people who enjoyed working with me. So just takes a lot longer to set that foundation, but it was a lot of time just going from basically failure to failure. Going and talking to people and meeting with people, just, oh God, I probably had 10, 15 meetings and phone calls with different potential clients a week, and none of them worked out, And so just eventually learning from that, finding the right types of people eventually. Because even if it was a conversation with these people who just weren't interested, almost everyone was willing to make a warm introduction to me to someone they thought would be interested. So that was what was pretty cool. So even though I was going and it wasn't a good fit and they weren't the right customer, not the right type of business that I should be working with, they would still open doors for me and say, oh, I'll sit down with Russ, great guy. Here, I think you should go and talk to this person and make that introduction. So that was cool. And that's eventually how I came to one of my first clients last March, really. So I had a little stuff here and there, and that was kind of like my first big client who I'm still doing a lot of work with today. And then from there, just slowly building, and adding on top of that.
Yeah, you recommended to me last summer a podcast with the guy who started Humans of New York.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He really struggled with starting that project for a very long time, and just a lot of no's, a lot of dejection, and it got to him. He said that really resonated with you because you heard that at a time you were in these first 9 months.
Right.
And it just felt like you were being told no, no, no. And it's like you're just spinning your wheels on ice, and it just felt like it wasn't going to go anywhere, which is a hard place to be in last year.
Yeah. So that podcast, a lot of the podcasts and books and stuff I like to listen to, like Gary Vaynerchuk, a lot I could say about him. But the biggest lesson for me in my entrepreneurial journey has been, it takes time. And it takes a lot of those rejections and setbacks. So hearing his story was incredible because, he's got millions of followers and all kinds of publicity. You never think that someone like him who's so successful would have a backstory like that. But the more I've continued to read books of other entrepreneurs, other folks who have, air quotes, made it, face the same challenges. Just years and years of building their company or building their brand or building whatever it was they were doing before they eventually kind of made it through. I know we both are fans of like Joe Rogan's podcast, and how many years did that guy just record? Hundreds. Now he's in thousands of podcasts before it like really took off. And now he's got millions of listeners, but many people are coming in at a late stage and don't see that those years of hustle where he just did it to do it and enjoyed it. And now it's huge.
Yeah, it started as joking conversations with his comedian friends on his bed, in his bedroom.
Oh, yeah.
And they were just joking around. And now it is the most downloaded podcast by a huge margin. And the Joe Rogan podcast, each episode is downloaded more times than almost every network television show to date. That's out right now.
Wow.
Like, it is a driving force. And it started in his bedroom, joking around with friends.
Yeah.
But it morphed. He took it seriously at some point. It changed.
Right.
And there's a lot of episodes that nobody's going to go back and listen to. Yep. But they tune in for the CEO of Twitter, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye the Science Guy. Yeah. All kinds of people who end up being on the show. Just amazing people.
Right. Yep.
And it just, a lot of people are able to read the last chapter of a successful story. And they forget like the 28 failures right before that success.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I see so many friends and so many people out there that either have thought about starting something, or maybe they did and they started something and they got discouraged. And after only putting in a little bit of the time and the work that it takes to really get there. So I think it's really important to highlight that, if you put out 5 podcasts or you put out a couple weeks worth of work and nothing comes from it, it takes more time. It's not you. It's not the idea even. Because what's clear to me now is like I've found my niche and the momentum is building. I hope to continue to see that build. So it's really needed. But even me, like with a service and the right background and hypothetically some of the right connections before I even got out, it still took me like a year to really get a lot of momentum going. So even more so, like if you're trying to come up with a new idea that people haven't heard before, or it's a new space for you, it can take a while. But if you're willing to put in that work, you will reap the benefits, in my opinion. I guess let me caveat that. There's 2 things I think is important. 1, it's doing that hustle, that grind to make it happen. But 2, always learning. Because where I started out a year ago and the kind of like service offering I was throwing out there, what I thought customers wanted was very different than where I am today. And honestly, I'm glad, because I was doing a lot more of like the research junk. Now I'm doing a lot more of like strategy and relationship and networking for these companies. Fortunately for me, I've continued to morph, and I just enjoyed a lot more the type of work that I'm doing now. But anyways, so those are the two things.
Yeah.
Doing the work and being willing to constantly pivot and change and morph your idea based on customer feedback and actually talking to people.
Right. You've had enough success that the weight, the burden, the monster right behind you to have like a monthly income is sort of disappearing. And now you get to focus on what I want to do tomorrow, what I want to do a year from now, and so on.
So, yep, building off and growing from here.
Yeah. And being here at time, I want to come back to one more thing about the music that we use here on the More You Know Co. A lot of people may not know you play it on an electronically plugged in keyboard, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so you and I we started playing piano around the same time in childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we might have even had the same piano teacher. Is that right?
I can't remember. I had a couple. Ellen McCoy, Duckworth's mom was actually my piano instructor for a little while.
Right.
But I had like 3 or 4 other teachers in there as well.
Sadly, I cut it out around like age 11 and 12, and I lost it. You continued. Mm-hmm. And this is almost kind of the same thing. You love that you can play the piano now. You really enjoy it. You love making music. There was a time in your adolescence when you hated playing the piano.
Yeah.
But your parents still insisted that you keep going. Yep. And so that is like another example of the grind, putting in the effort, the hustle, and now you get to play beautiful music when and however you want.
Yeah. And I feel like, on the entrepreneurship note, like my parents made me, I hated piano lessons for the longest time. But once I had that foundation in high school, I started writing music and I loved that. And honestly, I didn't have much support from many people then when I would write music. No one was really interested. Like if I was sitting around like in the band room playing on the piano, people would always come up and ask me to play someone else's song. Like some popular song. No one has ever like, write me a piece of music. But anyways, I don't know why I was getting off on that tangent. I just thought it was that's
an interesting point, yeah.
But that mentality though of like, I've learned this foundation, now I'm going to go create something new with it, is just kind of my personality. And so I feel that with this business, especially now that it's more fun. Same thing. I did my time in the Air Force. It was very bureaucratic in the kind of career field that I was in. Very much like cross your T's, dot your I's. Here's the checklist. Don't go color outside the lines. Like, so I learned those foundations, and then I was able to then step outside of it and create something new. So I just kind of feel like that's my personality. I learned something. I'll learn the foundations. I'll learn the rules, and then I'll figure out how to break them.
Right.
Not with contracting. That sounds like I'm doing something illegal. I realized as soon as I said that. But no, take it in a new way, like starting my own consulting business. And like I said, I thought there'd be a lot of people out there competing with me, but it's just not, at least not here in Colorado.
Yeah.
Probably if I go to the DC area, everyone and their mother's doing something like this, but not here.
Not here.
No.
That is Sir Russel Isaac Long.
That's right.
So if people are interested and they want to know a little bit more about your business or you, where should we send them? What's that web address? Or
try to be pretty active on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Russel Long. And my website is longcapture.com.
And you are the person I always reference in previous episodes if you are a steady listener. Ooh. When I talk about someone who uses LinkedIn to its full potential, that is this man right here.
Thank you. Yeah, Facebook's just too noisy anymore.
Yeah.
It's tough. So LinkedIn's been fun.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
I have some shout-outs for a couple people who make this show live and breathe, making it all possible. Trevor Fossey edits, mixes, and EQs our episodes, putting the time in behind the scenes. Russel Isaac Long provides us with the wonderful music that greets and departs all our episodes here at the More You Know Co. It's people like these two who have made this show possible, and I thank you both very much. To stay connected with the More You Know Co, follow us on Instagram or Facebook at the More You Know Co. Original, right? Don't worry, listener. We will be back soon with another episode featuring another person or a group of people. Thank you to everyone out there for listening and supporting the show and bringing our community together. Until next time, peace!